It begins in silence, far beneath the surface of the modern financial system, not in the noise of markets, not in the chaos of trading floors, not in the endless flicker of digital charts that rise and fall every second, but in places almost no one ever sees, deep underground, behind reinforced steel doors, inside vaults that are not designed for visibility, but for permanence. And inside those vaults, something ancient is moving again. Gold. Bar after bar, ton after ton, quietly transported, carefully stacked, precisely recorded, yet never truly explained to the public. There are no emergency announcements, no global warnings, no headlines suggesting panic. And that is exactly what makes it so powerful. Because while the world believes everything is stable, something very different is happening beneath the surface. Central banks, institutions that literally create money from nothing, are doing something that appears, at first glance, completely contradictory. They are buying gold at levels not seen in decades. And the question is not just why, but why now? In a world that has evolved into pure digital abstraction, where money exists as numbers on screens, where transactions move at the speed of light, where entire economies are built on invisible trust, why would the most powerful financial institutions in existence return to something so physical, so heavy, so unchanged for thousands of years? Because gold is not just a metal. It is a signal that the foundation beneath the global system is no longer as stable as it appears on the surface. And central banks do not act emotionally. They do not chase trends. They do not react to hype or speculation. Every move they make is calculated, long-term, and based on information far ahead of public awareness. So when they move together, quietly, consistently, across different continents and different economic systems, it is never coincidence. It is preparation. But preparation for what? To understand that, you have to look at the illusion that surrounds modern money itself. Because everything you interact with daily, your bank account, your salary, your digital payments, creates a powerful psychological effect. Stability. Money appears instant, seamless, effortless, permanent. You tap a screen, and value moves across the world in seconds. You never see the system behind it, so it feels natural, almost unbreakable. But that is the illusion. Because this entire structure does not rest on physical reality. It rests on something far more fragile. Confidence. Not gold, not assets, not even production. Just confidence that the system will behave tomorrow exactly as it behaves today. And confidence is not a physical resource. It cannot be measured directly. It cannot be stored. And most importantly, it does not fail loudly. It fails quietly, long before collapse becomes visible. Confidence begins to shift beneath the surface. And when that happens, the system does not break immediately. It bends. It adapts. It is supported through tools that most people never think about: monetary expansion, liquidity injections, and central bank intervention. To understand how fragile this really is, you need to understand inflation, not as the simplified idea of prices going up, but as something far more structural. Inflation is the gradual weakening of money's purchasing power. It happens when the supply of money grows faster than the real goods and services in an economy. Imagine a system where the total amount of value in existence stays relatively stable, but the number of monetary units representing that value keeps increasing. What happens? Each unit becomes smaller in real terms, not physically different, but economically diluted. Like pouring water into something concentrated, until its strength fades over time. And this is not an accident. It is a controlled mechanism used by central banks to stabilize economies, prevent recessions, and maintain liquidity during crises. But every time the system is expanded to prevent collapse, it becomes more dependent on that expansion. This is the hidden paradox. The system survives short-term, but becomes more fragile long-term. And nowhere was this more visible than in 2008, when the global financial system came dangerously close to freezing entirely. Banks stopped trusting each other. Credit markets collapsed. Liquidity disappeared almost overnight. And in response, central banks created trillions of dollars in new liquidity to prevent total collapse. It worked, but it also changed everything. Because after that moment, the system was no longer operating independently. It was operating on continuous support, a structure that requires constant reinforcement. Is not truly stable. It is maintained. And this is where the story begins to shift. Because while the public sees recovery, central banks see dependency. And while markets see growth, central banks see risk accumulation. This is where gold re-enters the system, not as a historical relic, but as a strategic counterbalance, because gold is fundamentally different from everything else in the financial system. It is not created by policy. It is not backed by debt. It is not someone else's liability. It cannot be inflated. It cannot be digitally expanded. It cannot be erased by a decision from a central authority. It exists outside the system. And in a world where everything else is becoming increasingly digital, interconnected, and dependent on trust, something outside the system becomes valuable. Again, not for speculation, but for protection. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable observation in the entire global financial structure. Central banks are not only reacting to the present, they are preparing for multiple futures at the same time. And when institutions that control monetary policy across nations begin to accumulate the same asset in the same direction over the same period of time, it usually means they are not responding to what is happening. They are responding to what they believe could happen, because beneath the surface, another shift is already in motion. The dominance of the US dollar, the backbone of global trade, reserves, and energy pricing is no longer being questioned openly, but it is being tested quietly through diversification, through alternative settlement systems, through gradual reduction of dependency, not a collapse. Repositioning, because dominance changes behavior. What was once just a currency becomes a tool of influence. And when financial systems become tied to geopolitical decisions, neutrality becomes a concern. And once neutrality is questioned, alternatives begin to emerge. This is where gold regains its strategic importance, not because it replaces the dollar, but because it exists outside of it. It cannot be sanctioned. It cannot be frozen. It cannot be controlled by any single government or institution. It is universally recognized and universally independent. And in a world where dependence on any single system introduces risk, independence becomes a form of security. This is why the shift is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It happens through accumulation. Slow, consistent, global process, now often referred to as de-dollarization, not as rebellion, but as diversification. Countries trade in multiple currencies. Financial systems begin to fragment into parallel structures, and central banks quietly increase their gold reserves as a stabilizing layer, not to escape the system, but to exist beyond full dependence on it. And when you step back and look at everything together, the debt levels, the monetary expansion, the geopolitical fragmentation, the increasing reliance on intervention, and now the quiet accumulation of gold, you begin to see a pattern that is no longer random. It is structural. And at the center of that structure is not economics. It is psychology, because every financial system in history has ultimately depended on one thing: trust. Trust that the system will function, trust that value will hold, trust that institutions will remain stable. But trust is not static. It erodes slowly, long before systems fail. Behavior changes. And central banks, unlike markets, unlike individuals, do not wait for failure to appear. They respond to shifts in probability. And when probability begins to tilt toward uncertainty, their behavior changes first. That is what gold represents. Not fear, not panic, but adaptation. A system quietly preparing for more than one possible future. And the most important realization is this: the system does not collapse when money disappears. It begins to change long before that. Quietly, continuously. Until one day, what once felt stable no longer does. And by the time most people notice the shift, it has already been happening for years.